Good morning. I'm Chad Stebbins from the Institute of International Studies, and thank you for coming this morning. We have people here in Corley Auditorium, and we have at least 20 or so watching by Teams. This morning's presentation is titled Discovering Prague in the Footsteps of History. It's one that I have been particularly looking forward to because Prague is the historical capital of Bohemia and perhaps the greatest cultural city in all of Europe, if not in all of the world. Our speaker is Dr. Ondřej Tikovský, an assistant professor of history at the University of Hradec Králové in the Czech Republic. The University of Hradec Králové is our partner university. We exchange students and now faculty. He specializes in early modern and cultural history, chiefly history through architecture and music. In 2016, he was appointed director of the Parliamentary Library and Archives of the Czech Republic in Prague. This mission of a parliamentary information specialist makes him active also within the Worldwide International Federation of Library Associations and the European Center for Parliamentary Research and Documentation. We're going to have a group of Missouri Southern students and faculty visiting the Czech Republic in December. Dr. Tikovský is going to serve as our personal tour guide the 2 days that we're in Prague. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Tikovský live from Hradec Králové, Czech Republic this morning.
Thank you very much, and good morning to Missouri from Hradec Králové, from Czechia, right from the heart of Europe. I feel really privileged, and this is not any phrase when I'm talking so, that I can take you to Prague. The only problem is that Prague, this is a giant topic. Huge stories are hidden beyond that notion. We only have 45 minutes, so I have tried to select for you some sampling, tasting of the many flavors of Prague, history, culture, and politics. Hopefully, this will make you motivated to discover more, maybe to come to join us, and you will also fall in love as I did many years ago. We will jump right into the early 17th century. I hope you can see my introductory slide. And this is one section of a beautiful long view or panoramic view, if you like, of the city. Why I'm beginning with such a detail? Well, there is a special characteristic feature about Prague, unlike with other cities. You can really see every single detail here. You can see the castle, you can see the slopes, the medieval walls, even the people, the spires, the, I would say, urban countryside. And what is so special about Prague, it is that you can very easily identify the place several hundred years ago as well as now. If we make a little comparison, which enables us with the following slide, and take a look at London of approximately the same style with the river and also with the churches and spires. And then if we realize that London and other huge cities and capitals are changing its shapes, or their shapes, sorry, and their atmosphere every century, every decade, every year. And then when we go back to Prague, which is now again, I hope you can see, you can now understand what I meant, that Prague is simply intact. Prague always has been the residential place of the rulers, of the political power, of culture. The focal point of spirituality, of religion was always there. And now this is not eclipsed by any modern architecture. Of course, I'm not saying that Prague is not a modern city, but I want to say that Prague remains intact, its urban historic structure. And this I find very valuable. You know the situation very well, landing, being on the plane board, anywhere, you know, if you take Europe, for instance, in Frankfurt or in London, or even in the former, politically speaking, Eastern Europe, like Warsaw, for instance, you can see the downtown, or you can see the skyscrapers. They are much alike, and sometimes it's difficult to tell the cities apart where exactly you are. But Prague is absolutely, and this is the word of today, unmistakable. The castle is there, the churches are there, the roofs as they were centuries ago, which is of course fantastic. And this makes for me Prague one and the only one. If we go back again to the initial slide, I would like to get you acquainted a bit with the geography of the city, especially when you come to see the Czech Republic's heart in early December. So the main edifice to the right of this beautiful etching or engraving, it's the castle, it's the residential place. And it is justly considered to be the largest inhabited residence of a ruler in the world since the 10th century. Wonderful. At the same time is the spiritual center. You can see the cathedral. We will talk a little bit about the cathedral. So this is Prague, what it looked like in 1606. And underneath castle, you can see houses and market square and palaces and churches. And then in the beginning of the 17th century, they were crammed with people from all over Europe because Prague was the residential city of the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, which means many Italians, many Hungarians, Spaniards flocked together, artists. We will talk about them briefly. So you can imagine Prague as cosmopolitan place with special districts like we have now in cosmopolitan cities. So Little Italy, maybe Little Toledo, a little German quarters and others. If we move on, we have already seen London, and now we can see Prague Castle, what it looks like now with the so-called lesser quarter or the little town of Prague beneath the castle. We can continue with the long view. So I'm really taking you to the beginning of the 17th century, and you can see the important element of the city and its characteristic feature, and this is the river in the middle. The river called either Vltava in Czech, if you want to try some Czech pronunciation, or Moldau, Moldovia, Moldava, simply derivated versions of the Slavic name. And this makes Prague a perfect scene for history and also for artists. Imagine the center which is spread over both banks of the river, which is rather broad, then the beautiful bridge, and then on one side the castle. We saw a moment ago to the right hand, we see the old town, and then the city was spreading farther already in the 14th and 15th century. So another notion I'm introducing to you, this is the Vltava River. You will definitely have a chance also to get acquainted with the famous music composed by the Czech national composer Bedřich Smetana, who celebrated the river, and he was not the only one. So without the river in the middle, it would not be the same Prague, of course. And then the bridge. Everyone is interested in the history of the bridge, for it's one of the oldest surviving medieval stone-built bridges of Europe. It must have been such a pride of the country. Imagine stretching over more than 500 meters. It's called Charles Bridge after another ruler I'm going to mention. And what's interesting about Charles Bridge, this is the date, and as you can see in the brackets, I included the date 1357. This is the date of its foundation, or when the cornerstone was tapped. But the question you might ask now is, why is someone highlighting and stressing a date of the foundation of some bridge in Central Europe? You know, Prague is also a magic city with a special magic power. And if you read the numbers of the foundation, you can recognize that these are odd numbers, 1, 3, 5, 7, ascending up. So one is missing, this is 9, and then we can go down again, descend with 9, 7, 3, 5, 1. And now we can easily remember the date, the minute precise date of its foundation. It was the year 1357, the 9th day of the 7th month, which is July, I hope, then at 5 o'clock and 31 minutes in the morning. This is please not a joke. This wants you to turn your attention to some mysticism, which is also linked to Prague. So this date is one of the proofs that there are many secrets behind and that there is much to discover. And I'm sure you will astonish everyone if you, after this presentation, remember such a precise moment and minute and second of the foundation of Charles Bridge somewhere in Europe in the 14th century. We moved a little bit to the south and we can see the so-called New Town, and you can now really realize how large the city was already in the medieval era. The New Town was planned and founded in the year 1348, and to the right that is the very end of the city, linked with the wall, classic fortification with the crenellation. And this is a little headland, rocky headland over the river. This is a mythical place called High Castle. We can put it into English really, literally, word by word. This is called High Castle or Vyšehrad, and this is where all the legends about the foundation of Prague, about the arrival of Bohemians, about the mythical princes and prophets took place. So you have many, many places to talk about and to discover. This is the end of introduction, and we may ask, what is Prague now? So Prague is the UNESCO World Heritage Site, justly. Someone calls Prague the mother of cities. This is one of the oldest settlements, urban settlements in Europe. It's preserved, unlike many European cities which were bombed during World War II. Remember Dresden, Warsaw, Berlin, Nuremberg, and many others, of course. The liberation took a heavy toll, really, in 1944 and 45. Luckily, this was not the case of Prague. So mother of cities, still alive. City of 100 spires. It's true, it's not exaggerated. Well, honestly, there are several hundreds of spires, towers, turrets, and domes. The one you can see in the picture is also genuinely Gothic, medieval. It's the Gate Tower of Charles Bridge, of the bridge we talked about a moment ago. So it is a witness to the 14th century with beautiful medieval decoration. How powerful it is, isn't it? Golden Prague, it's logical. What I mean by lesser Europe, I mean Europe in small. For, you know, in the 20th century, owing to the political development, Central and Eastern Europe was sometimes deprived of its richness in diversity and nationalities. I am now not speaking only about the political views and about culture, but also about the ethnic cleansing and about transfer of populations. But Prague really was for centuries a cradle and the mother town for Czech-speaking people, German-speaking people, and also for Jews. So many influences and shades of Europe from culture and nationalities could have been found in Prague. Crossroads is clear, and the last quotation is just for you to make it a bit funny. Well, time passes very quickly, and I promised you to take you to the court of two rulers in the times when Prague was really the most important place in Europe. It's true. In my annotation, I mentioned that Bertolt Brecht, the German poet and playwright, composed a poem which opens with the line, "There are 3 emperors buried in Prague." He wanted to highlight that this is a special place. Well, because of the time limitation, I have only 2 for you, but hopefully they will do. But they are really special ones. The gentleman in the left portrayal or picture is Charles IV. So we can see the medieval ruler of Western Christianity, or if you want, of the Western Christendom. This is the person who made Prague capital of the Holy Roman Empire for the first time. And if you look at the picture, you can get the feeling of the time and also of Prague. He is definitely a pious person, dedicated to prayer, kneeling perhaps before the altar. And this is really what he did. And he was obsessed with establishing churches, monasteries, and celebrating saints, collecting their relics. Very wise ruler indeed, and that's why Prague is so spiritual. Prague is also intellectual, thanks to the other gentleman, Rudolf II, Habsburg. We are already in the time of Renaissance, humanism, and the portrayal is utterly different. At least the atmosphere is utterly different, isn't it? He is portrayed by an Italian artist, Arcimboldo, as the Roman god Vertumnus. And Vertumnus was the god of pomology. That means fruits, gardens, orchards, and also changing seasons. Changing seasons, it means metamorphosing. And really, during the time of humanism and the time when Rudolf held his court in Prague, many philosophers, scientists, wise men flocked in Prague to contemplate over the possibilities of science, humanities. They were experimenting, conducting chemical experiments. Fascinating time, and I think that the idea of transformation and searching for other dimensions which are somewhere there beyond is perfectly conveyed with this very picture. So let's go on and let's visit the time of the first gentleman, Charles IV. So this means Gothic. If I say Gothic in Czech, it only refers to the architecture. If I say Gothic in English, if I'm not mistaken, it also associates some atmosphere, perhaps a bit gloomy atmosphere, bleak even, Gothic. Well, Gothic was not black and white at all, and here you have a proof. You can go to Paris to see Saint-Chapelle, the beautiful church full of light and stained glasses. We have here this wonderful mosaic, which links Prague to the culture and artistry of Italy, the artistry of Mediterranean area. And this is really the largest exterior mural mosaic in Central Europe. It consists of 1 million pieces of glass, and the glass conveys more than 80 different shades of colors. It's fantastic. It's the last judgment scene, the doomsday, and it was the entry to the cathedral, to the most sacred place of the kingdom. And the rendition is simply fantastic. So this is one special place from outside and now from inside. This is the chapel of St. Wenceslas, as we call, or Václav in Czech, who is the patron saint of Bohemia. And this is partially his shrine. And now you are ushered into an intact, genuine Gothic interior, which has been untouched since the 14th century. Think that over 230 gems are inlaid in the walls. The price is simply incalculable. The Gothic frescoes cover more than 80 square meters. It's really the sacred crossroads of the country, and it's still here. So when we say Gothic, we do not necessarily have to limit ourselves to England or to the Gothic cathedrals of France, but we can also go to Prague and see those places. Something very special for you, and I'm very, very proud of this. Medieval religious mysticism. Just a little hint for you will arrive, some of you. Can you see the aerial view of the city center? This is the left-hand picture, and then the plain map. This is the right-hand picture. This is a plan of 5 churches which were established by the Emperor Charles IV within the walls of new town of Prague in the 14th century. And it can't have been by chance that they are so, or the distances are so irregular. So it's really a cross, you know, 4 churches in the corners and 1 in the middle. Can't have been by chance. But what mission they shall convey, I can't tell you. Should it be resembling heavenly Jerusalem, you know, biblical associations, or maybe some special blessing from above? Who knows? It remains revealed, but I think it's really very, very interesting. Okay, let's skip to 100 centuries ahead to the 16th century, to the time of humanism and Renaissance. And I have a building which looks a bit humble, maybe even plain, but to me, it's a perfect embodiment of the time and of the importance of Prague in the 16th century. I spoke about the court of the emperor, who could be called the emperor collector, you know. It is him who was portrayed as the Roman god of vegetables and fruits. And now we have star, the heavenly body and the heavenly bodies. And we can think of longing for discoveries, examinations, learning, investigations, not only of the universe, of the heavenly bodies, but also of chemical substances, the human body as such. Think of autopsies. That's why I have here Leonardo da Vinci's sketch. But the principle remains the same. The circle, you know, the balance, geometry, and the geometry is also coded in this hunting lodge. It's a mere hunting lodge, but even the hunting lodge was so important for the ruler that he shaped it, by the way, himself, he was the architect, to express something about the atmosphere of the time. Simply astronomy, astrology, investigation, and maybe much more, which we can't understand. The Emperor Rudolf was a keen, dedicated, passionate collector, and he really had many artists at his court. So a little example here is a beautiful painting by Bartholomew Spranger, or that special object rarity, which is in fact a find from a stomach of a goat, which was supposed to be an antidote, you know, to be a special medicine if the king got poisoned. So science was very often mixed with just prejudices. And to the link, to the left, it was German. Sometimes I mix up languages. Sorry. If you look at the left picture, you can see a little lane or alley. This is a part of Prague Castle, and this is supposed to have been the laboratories of the alchemists. Well, we know this is highly unlikely. Perhaps the guards lived there, but the legend has it so, and we keep the legends alive. Now I have something special for you, proper English, and of a witness from England, William Crown, who traveled in 1636 to Bohemia and who visited with his lord, who was the envoy of King Charles I, the collections of Rudolf. And he had it recorded and then published in London. By the way, William Crown later on moved to America and died in Massachusetts. But it's very, very fascinating to read what everything could be found amidst the collection of that monarch. For instance, great unicorn horn. Okay, what was it? Who knows? Some gadgets, mechanical gadgets, anatomy such as cockatrice. Cockatrice, I do not know how much frequented word it is in the English language, but it's a mythical beast, essentially a two-legged dragon or a serpent-like creature, which a rooster's had. Okay, well, it never existed, but the emperor thought that he had it within his collections. The English which I used is, of course, the Old English of the 17th century, but I hope it entertained you a little bit and also fascinated. We have to move on, and we leave the time and space of the kings and emperors, and we have to speak about the Jews or Hebrew culture. For Prague was really the city of three elements, and by saying elements, I do not mean the elements of nature like wind and water and fire, but I mean the cultural elements, because we can't speak of nationalities. The concept of nations and nationalities is of later years, the 19th century. This is the Europe's oldest surviving synagogue. Fascinating. So the Jews, and the Jews could be speaking German, Yiddish, Hebrew, any other language, and it must have made the environs of Prague very, very enriching. And you can see a sketch of a legendary apparition maybe, or a ghost, or a man-made robot, to put it in modern words. It's called Golem, or the Golem. And I discovered in the plan of your lectures, which are going to take place, that you will talk about haunted Prague, and Golem is of course included. So every tourist wants to learn about Golem. According to a story, the rabbi, you can see him in the picture, was endowed with special magic powers, and he created from clay this man-made being and brought it to life by placing a special bead or tablet into his mouth, and that was Golem. Where is Golem now? No one knows. Some journalists still in the beginning of the 20th century were persuaded that he is resting in the attic of this old synagogue. So this is the Jewish element, and when we talk about Jewish element, we have to mention Franz Kafka. Franz Kafka, Czech-born, German-speaking Jew, typical Prague mixture, wonderful. And I love the English word Kafkaesque, which, if I'm not mistaken, is only known among experts. And this word perfectly matches the atmosphere of Kafka's novels, short stories, and writing. It conveys the feeling of something which is illogical, something which creates eerie atmosphere, makes the person feel lost in the bureaucratic world. And this statue, I think, again, perfectly fits the character of Kafka. Look, please, to the right. It's revolving head of the writer consisting of 42 layers that keep revolving. So maybe it wants to say, okay, it's very Kafkaesque for Kafka feels dizzy himself, and his head is spinning, and sometimes the modern society and the labyrinth of the modern world makes our head goes round and spinning. And the more funny, I think, this capture of the character is when I tell you that the building, the backdrop is the mayor's office of Prague. So the seat of bureaucratic principles and bureaucratic rule, and Kafka there. You will talk about Kafka, I know, and about his metamorphosis. Some speciality or specialties about Prague. This is the style that could only be seen and experienced in Prague. It existed for a very short time in 1920s. Imagine the time after World War I, when the Czechs again regained their independence and when Czechoslovakia was established. And the architects were looking for the articulation of the national style. And they wanted to create something optimistic and something Czech-based or Czechoslovak-based. And the result is Rondo Cubism. Isn't it a bit contradictory if we analyze the essence of the verse? It's either Cubism or it's Rondo Cubism, but hopefully you will also have a chance to investigate the Czech sense of humor. And I think there is much of the Czech sense of humor when we speak about Rondo Cubism, which sounds as a nonsense. It isn't, it's beautiful. It's typically Czech or Czechoslovak, and you will have a chance to see those buildings when you are in Prague or if you come yourselves. Okay, then something more universal regarding architecture of the 20th century. And this is a villa, a family house, planned and built by Adolf Loos, German-speaking architect and designer, but born in the territory of the Czech lands. Again, the interconnection is fantastic. And this is Villa Müller. From outside, it looks a bit plain, even unstimulating, a common building, but it is the interior that matters, you know. This is one of the most innovative ideas regarding the architecture of the 20th century. And this is the space planning. For Adolf Loos didn't work with plans and corridors and square meters. He worked with spaces, and the inner space is really interconnected and ever-changing, very different. And the outer facade is just a shell. For, as he said, I do not design the house for passers-by. I do it for the owner, for the possessor. So this is the interior that matters. And this idea was really revolutionary, and I think he was a genius. So this is Villa Müller, and the so-called Raumplan. It's a German word which means space planning. So no longer two-dimensional plans, but in 3D, please. We are doing space planning. We are running out of time, but I can't omit Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Of course, a genius of music. Everybody likes Vienna. Everybody knows Salzburg, beautiful birthplace of this prodigy musician. However, not much is left from the buildings where he dwelt, where he really was active. The left picture shows you the theater in which he conducted Don Giovanni, the best of his operas, definitely, composed in Prague. And the beautiful villa was his retreat when he was really, really enforced to finish the overture to Don Giovanni the very day of the first night premiere. I have to share with you the story. I think it's known, but once talking about Mozart, I have to do it. The musicians were pleading with him, saying, okay, we do not have the score. The night is nearing. How shall we play the overture? It's not ready. And Maestro was responding, of course it's ready. Where is it then? In my head. and it really happened that after all, he put it on the paper, and Don Giovanni was a great success. So this is Mozart. Some political events. 5 minutes and we are done. But of course, Prague was not only a place of flourishing culture and science. I have to be frank with you. Also, being at the crossroads of Europe, a place where important and not always positive deeds happened. And since the United States of America have a lot to do with the Protestants and Catholics and with their disputes at the beginning of its foundation, I can't skip the 30-Year War, the first global conflict between Catholics and Protestants, which sparked in Prague. You can see the engraving depicting precisely the trial with the Catholic governors, and the trial was conducted in the Czech way. And the sentence was, throw them out of the window. It really happened. So the window you can see in the second picture, this was the Bohemian Chancellery, is one of the most fatal windows of Europe, for this is where the 30-Year War began. And then the last picture, it depicts the Catholic propaganda, we may say, because the governors survived and the Catholics explained it by saying that the angels helped, who else? So this is the 30-Year War, which opened and ended in Prague. Then a very serious topic from World War II. As you know, Czechoslovakia was occupied by Nazi Germany, and the Nazis were everywhere. The situation was very desperate. And the protector or the governor of the German Nazi regime was a certain Reinhard Heydrich, who was a person who co-masterminded the Holocaust, the plan of the final solution of the so-called Jewish question. And he was the governor of Prague, and the Czechs decided to eliminate him. And they succeeded. you can see a common mural, but I think it's very powerful. It's flanking the street, and you can see towards the end of the wall the paratroopers jumping from the plane coming from Great Britain, where the paratroopers were trained, then getting their plan ready, plotting, coming with the bike, and finally the German car with SS sign coming with the red head of the villain, and they really eliminated him, assassinated. So this is a very, very meritorious deed of the Czechs, with which they contributed to the victory of Allies over Nazi Germany. And finally, of course, 1968 and the Soviet era. I can't remain silent about this. The left picture shows to you, as we call it, the signature of Leonid Brezhnev, the then leader of the Soviet Union and the Secretary General of the Communist Party, the Soviet Communist Party. And you know that when Czechoslovakia and the Czechoslovak people during Prague Spring and during the, let's say, revival time wanted to make the society more democratic and more independent of Russia or the Soviet Union, Russian tanks arrived in August 1968, and as it is a habit of the Soviet soldiers, they started shooting against the edifice of the National Museum. It was merely a museum, not any governmental building, but the hollows of the bullets are still there. And even though the building is now carefully soft-hand renovated, the signs are there. It is a memento saying, well, you know, democracy is not self-evident. Freedom is not self-evident. There were times when, and the times are not that long gone by. So it's a big memento of the Soviet occupation. On the contrary, for I wanted to conclude with something positive. This is a wall which you might find a bit ugly even. It's called John Lennon's wall, and it was the articulation of freedom, of longing for freedom since 1970s. When I say 1970s in Czechoslovakia and in Prague, it means socialism, communist oppression, no freedom of speech, no human rights. So people, especially after Soviet occupation, so you can see the link between the two pictures, were trying to smuggle into the open space, the shared space, public space, any message of hope, maybe a piece of poetry, a sign of love, of freedom, simply to smuggle the Western values into the streets of Prague. Police, not only the secret police, did its best to cover it in white, and thus the layers were being add because new people were coming and painting and leaving their messages, and it has been going on ever since, which I find absolutely fantastic. So if we were archaeologists and we could excavate the layers, we could really go back into the times of oppressed freedom. And by the way, when I was listening to the news 2 days ago, I learned that a new rendition of the wall has been carried out, now advocating the freedom for Ukraine, which I find very, very topical. Okay, Prague in a nutshell. Just a few minutes are left. I wanted to highlight the most important issues, phenomena. There are many more, and I will be happy to answer your questions, to welcome you in Prague, or to stay in contact per email, whatever you like. Thank you for being interested in this very intriguing place.
Thank you, Ondřej. We have about 10 minutes left for questions. Who has the first one? I'll ask the first one.
Okay.
If an American were going to Prague and could only see 2 or 3 things, what would you recommend? If it's, say you had 24 hours in Prague, one day, what are the must-sees? Besides Prague Castle, certainly, but what else?
Okay. If Prague atmosphere or the history of Prague was strong in something, it was culture. For unlike the United States, the Czechs are a minor culture with the minor language. Not much Czech literature is read in the the original version, we had to try really not twice, but 5 times as much as the other nations during the revival. And I think this is Czech culture, the Czech culture of the 19th century, which is articulated in music, in drama, in paintings. So I would take you to museums and I would take you to the National Theatre, for it's a fantastic story, a little comparison for we, the scholars like making comparisons and following comparative studies. In Budapest, for instance, in the capital of Hungary, the main edifice that attracts the attention of people is the parliament. The intention was of the Hungarians to top the Parliament of London. And this is the building which was built in the 19th century. And what is a parliament? This is about political representation, about the statehood. You can't find parliament in Prague, almost, for we were not independent. I say we, sorry, I'm a bit very personal, but one of the leading and most striking features in the skyline of the city is the National Theatre. So where parliament stands on the bank of the river in Budapest, we have on the bank of the Vltava River, the National Theatre, for what was politics for the Hungarians, was culture for the Czechs, either the opera or a drama. So I would like to share with you the story of Czech culture and the Czech survival strategy through the culture and education. It was only one place more. You asked me for 3, perhaps.
Right.
Okay. And then, surprisingly, I don't know how much it was evident from my presentation, but Prague really occupies a bit dramatic valley. So we have some hills and slopes. That means there is much greenery within the city. So I would take you to the park to enjoy something different and also a free space, which is not self-evident in the downtowns, is it?
So wouldn't you take us to Charles Bridge so we could see the hundreds of souvenir vendors lining all the sides?
I will try to warn you not to not to be bothered by all the baskers selling their souvenirs there, even though they might be nice. But I will take you somewhere for genuine quality products shopping. But of course, Charles Bridge will be included. And everything is manageable on foot, by the way.
I agree. I find Prague to be a very walkable city, easy to find your way around.
It is.
Questions from the audience?
When I hear Holy Roman Empire, yes, I think of Charlemagne. You had Charles IV. Is Charles IV Charlemagne, or was he earlier?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for your question. I admire your knowledge. You perfectly pinpointed the essence. Really, the Holy Roman Empire was an attempt to renew a universal realm in Europe. There was the Byzantine Empire, which was the Eastern Christendom, and the Holy Roman Empire. It was supposed to be the Western Christendom. And really, Charlemagne was the first one. So if we count one by one, we will reach Charles IV. So there were 2 more in between. Actually, what's so funny about European monarchs, as you may know, they sometimes had more honorary degrees. So one degree was related, for instance, to the Kingdom of Hungary or Burgundy or Flanders, and the numbering would be different. So with the same name, you could have different numbers in different countries. But to answer your question, frankly, no, it's not the same. Charlemagne is the year 800, and our Charles IV, by the way, to repeat the joke one more time, who was as the Czech or Bohemian king Charles I. As the Roman Empire, he was Charles IV. It's the year 1316 when he was born till 1378. So 5 centuries. Tell them apart.
Other questions? Way over here.
Hello. I don't remember if you mentioned this or not, but are you still able to see Emperor Rudolph's collection?
Very good point. Yes, if you go to Sweden, Stockholm, yes, if you go to Vienna, Austria, and a little bit in Prague. By the way, when I shared with you the witnesses of William Crown, the few records, there are many more, of course, 2 pages from 1636. It was important because he was one of the last persons to be privileged to see the Rudolphinian collections intact. It was the year 1636, and in 1648, Prague was besieged by the Swedes. It was the end of 30-year war, if you remember, the beginning in Prague and the end in Prague. And the Swedes really came with a with a list of precious objects, which was carefully prepared by the Swedish Queen Christina. And Christina knew what everything was included in the collections of the emperor. And they took the best to Sweden, but they look after, I would say, Czech produced pieces of art. And for instance, the largest book of the Middle Ages, was made in one monastery in Eastern Bohemia, when I'm sitting now, and it was a part of the collections. It's called the Devil's Bible, because there is a huge the depiction of a devil, and it's supposed to be the hugest parchment-made medieval book of Europe. So it was taken to Sweden, and now it's a part of the famous Uppsala University Library collections. So much of it is still left, but not in one place and not in Prague.
Anyone else? Well, all that touring and walking around Prague makes me hungry. What are we going to eat? Where are you taking us?
Of course, I didn't want to be superficial, but Czech beer is a must. You can imagine the best layer of foam with a zest. Really invigorating drink for the Czechs and for the guests, also for you. So we will perhaps go to some craft brewery, maybe into a monastery of Břevnov or to other monasteries, for the monks are good brewers. And there are also very famous beer bars, traditional beer bars. If I say bar, I mean the bar in the style of the 19th century. So really open to the guests, not modern music, with nice interior decorations, cozy place. So we will either go to the place called Upinkasu or something of this kind.
Very good. Any final questions from the audience? Let's see, one last, this will be the last question, so make it a good one, sir.
Jak se máš?
Oh, výborně, děkuji. It was, how are you in Czech?
That's the only Czech I know from my grandmother.
Perfect. Hello, thank you, lovely.
Could you say a little about the Czech sense of humor compared to the American? Because good Solderschweck or Spiegel, you know who they are.
Yes.
Could you speak on that?
I can't judge the Americans, you will understand, but the Czechs, yes, I think the Czech sense of humor, and this is a huge topic again, I think it developed as a sort of survival strategy. You know, Bohemia, Moravia, or now Czechia, the western part of Czechoslovakia, it was the buffer territory, do you say, or buffering territory between the German West and Russian East, and so on and so forth. Every now and then, you can imagine Central Europe changing identity every decade. And I think that the Czechs didn't have the other chance but to cope with the situation. You can't fight when you are small in numbers. Well, you can try, but not for a long time. So maybe a sense of humor, which is a bit, you know, biting, going under the skin, some sort of self-deprecating, cynical a bit. I think it developed in this way. It's the sense of humor that helps us to go ahead and to cope with troublesome situations. And the Czechs say that if someone understands the Czech sense of humor, then he really understands the Czech soul. Maybe we shall include a lecture on the Czech sense of humor, or we can organize something concerning this issue during your stay in Prague. So it's my explanation of the origin of the Czech sense of humor, which is sometimes difficult to understand. It's actually making fun of the Czechs themselves. It's ironic, very often ironic and biting, a bit biting, but wrapped up in a polite way. Polite package.
Thank you, Dr. Tikovský. That was a very enlightening presentation. Let's give him one final round of applause.
Thank you.
And some of us will see you in Prague in about 3 months. Have a good weekend.
I am ready. Thank you. Have a nice Friday. Good day from Czechia. Thank you.